From Kentucky is recognized for 5
Move
minutes.
to strike the last word.
Is recognized to strike the last word for 5 minutes.
Well, the gentleman from Massachusetts' analysis is wrong. An APR doesn't apply to a non-credit product. That's the problem with the analysis. That's the flaw in his argument. And those Republicans that he cites opposing the creation of the CFPB become more and more prescient as the years go by, and we see how harmful the CFPB is to consumers that they're supposed to protect. Because instead of actually protecting a competitive marketplace where Americans who need access to products to enable them to meet to make ends meet, the CFPB is eliminating access to those products, whether they're credit products or earned wage access products like these. And because we're experiencing 40-year high inflation, these products are more in demand than ever before, because the inflation crisis that this administration has hoisted upon the American people require more Americans to have early access to their wages that don't go as far as they used to because of Biden's inflation. So let's stop applying an APR analysis to products that aren't credit products. And with that, I would yield to my friend, the author of the legislation I support, the gentleman from Wisconsin.
I appreciate the gentleman yielding. We've heard a little bit of some studies that are out there. I think it's worth looking at the FTI consulting study on this, and in particular, it'll note that 80% of EWA services help the workers save money on overdraft fees. So I think one of the questions is, what do people do when they do need money in short order? There's not a utopia. Money doesn't come out of a tree. So then the real world question becomes, what do they do? What are the options? And in this FTI study, it looks back and says that if EWA weren't available, users would consider, number one, not paying certain bills on time. As we know, that is detrimental for the long-term credit of an individual. Two, 38% would overdraft. As we know, there's fees associated with that. That often makes people in the long run end up going backwards. And then the third was 35% was a payday loan, which is an option for individuals, but is definitely not the best option that we would think is out there in the total world. So as we look at EWA as a product that is available to consumers, it's a product that really addresses how do people get by in a pinch. In a utopia, you wouldn't have somebody in that situation. In the real world, people do find themselves in that situation far too often, as noted by my colleague, Mr. Barr, in large part because of the inflation that's been brought on, where everything's almost 20% more expensive than it was when President Biden came to office. But if we look at how do we address this, how do we leverage the technology that's before us, what I was trying to do is what was been discussed, put forward guidance, put forward guardrails to protect workers, allow further innovation in this space under the guise of allowing Congress to work its will to make sure we're protecting consumers and allowing innovation. I think the bill as drafted does that, and it's the reason that we have a great opportunity to put forward a structured framework to help workers and avoid some of the other challenges that they might face in the event that they had an unexpected expense, and to allow them an alternative to an overdraft, a payday loan, or abandoning or not paying a bill on time, because we know the negative consequences of those three options. This in many ways provides an alternative that is a positive step for many people. And again, in the legislation, we require the free option, again, a guardrail and innovation to make sure that we're working to protect consumers. And so although I won't be supporting the underlying amendment from my colleague, Mr. Green, I do think ultimately this legislation moves us in the right direction, uses the authority of Congress to provide worker protections and innovation in the space, and more directly connect workers to the fruit of their labor. I yield back to my colleague, Mr. Barr.
I appreciate the gentleman's work on this bill. Again, I support the legislation, and I would just kind of conclude by just saying, look, there's a reason why Republicans were critical of the idea of the CFPB at the outset of its creation, and they appear to be more and more prescient every day, and that is that instead of protecting consumers, the Bureau seeks to take away products and services that are in demand with the American people. And with that, I yield.